officially welcome everybody to our meetup today with Clarke Ching. I think everybody already has found out how to spot a bottleneck or how to find it in your work process. But where do you actually place the right one, and intentionally? That's what we're going to talk today. And I'm really happy that Clarke is joining us today. And you won't believe it, the last time he was here was in May 2020, over 2 years ago. So right at the beginning of the pandemic. And that was actually just half a year in when our meetup started, or when we founded this meetup. And right today, we actually hit the 800 members mark. So I find this a really good opportunity to actually have Clarke in again as one of our homegrown, or not homegrown, how can you say, our home heroes of New Zealand. It's a home show here. And I'm really happy to have you here today, because we had a good chat at the beginning of the pandemic about the meetup, and you gave me a lot of good tips. Still thankful for. And also, of course, today, as usual, we are doing this together with Australia, Melbourne and Sydney meetups with Dan. Dan, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, hi folks. It's great to see so many friendly and familiar faces from Melbourne and Sydney, and there's also, I think, a few people dialing in. Vinny's from Perth as well. So there's a few people from all around Australia here. So welcome everyone from Australia, but also we have some international guests that we've seen already as well. So yeah, welcome to everyone else from outside the Great Southern Lands we have down here.
Cool. We are recording this meetup as usual, and those that are new, we have a Kanban New Zealand YouTube channel, and you also see all the previous recordings up there if you're interested, and this one, of course, will be up there as well. Cool. Welcome everybody, and I hand over to you, Clarke.
Lovely. Right, I'm going to share my screen. It's always a good start. So can I give a little bit of a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Should be able to see something now. Excellent. Okay, lovely. I'll just resize this. Hang on, it allowed me to resize yesterday. And there we go. Okay, and I'll just get a few more people on my screen. Hey, what would be lovely for me, I don't know about you, but for me, what would be lovely is if you can all smile at me as I'm talking, and if I'm talking nonsense, make a face or leave a comment or something like that. And if you could, actually, can I just get you to warm up your fingertips just a little bit, and just tell me your PIN number, please. And where you are, where are you? So we can just get a little bit of a running thing here in the chat system, and I'll start if I can get this to work. So I'm in Nelson, New Zealand. Oh, we got Wellington, Auckland, Seattle. Jay. Hello, Jay. Melbourne. Oh, good, nice mix of Melbourne. Turangi, excellent. Auckland, Sydney, Wellington, Lahore for Pakistan. Brilliant. And I got the PIN number 1234. Excellent. Western Australia, Perth. Vinny. Yes, I was actually, one of my clients is in Perth, and I've just spent a couple of hours this afternoon. The Netherlands, that's far too early in the morning. Victoria, Wellington, Melbourne, and Poland. I reckon Poland's a good achievement. Well done. To Poland. Indonesia, I wasn't expecting that. Seoul. Gosh, okay. So aren't we just a very versatile, multicultural group here? And I'm now going to go and show you a picture and bring down all this lovely international thing and show you a picture of a warship. I got to apologize. The flagship in a navy, and that I imagine is the one you're seeing on the screen there is an American one. I'm guessing. The flagship is in a navy armada. It's the big ship that's in the old days had the flag on it of the country, and it would have the admiral of the armada. So it's like the most important ship. I've got a couple of other metaphors. And what I'm going to do with this is in this book here, hang on, I think I've pressed the iPad screen. In this book here, if you want a copy and you haven't got one, just track me down on LinkedIn and just ask for a copy and I'll send you a copy. Very, very easy to do through LinkedIn. This book here, I listed 5 different types of bottleneck. I'm not even sure if I can remember them all, but there was wild bottleneck, which is a bottleneck that's out there and no one knows about. And that's the most common sort of bottleneck. You'll probably be working somewhere where people don't actually even know they have a bottleneck. They don't know the idea. And then when they do, suddenly their world changes because they can see everything just differently. So there's a wild one, there's a tamed one, which is a bottleneck that was wild, and you've gone and you've found it, you've done the kind of like the cowboy thing with the wild horses, and you've tamed it and you've got it running good. There's a deliberate bottleneck, which is actually, I don't have one here. Does anyone have a bottle of wine there that they could hold up and show the audience? There we go. Thank you. I'm just checking. There's only one. So see the bottle of wine there.
Good for something.
The top of the bottleneck is actually deliberately at the top, and it helps the wine flow out at a reasonable pace. So that's a deliberate bottleneck. It's been put there, and they've deliberately made it skinny. If it had Tabasco in it, you know, when you look at a Tabasco sauce, the bottleneck is much thinner, so that it just drips out. Bottlenecks, if they are tamed, are really good. But sometimes as part of taming them, you will actually put in a deliberate bottleneck. And there's 2 other sorts of bottleneck that I put in there in the book. One is the right place bottleneck. So in other words, there's lots of places you could have a bottleneck, and that's really what we're going to talk about today, getting the bottleneck in the right place. And the beautiful thing about a bottleneck's in the right place is you have your optimal running system, all other things being equal. But if you have a bottleneck, and even if it's tamed and you're managing it and it's in the wrong place, you can actually you can make things really inefficient and still think you're doing a really good job. And the last one was the right stuff bottleneck, which is that you've got a system, you've got the bottleneck there, you're managing it, but you're also making sure that the stuff that you put into your system is the right stuff. And the right stuff often depends on where the bottleneck is. So if you want to learn more about that, just LinkedIn, and I'll very happily send you a PDF of the book to get your head around that. Today, I'm going to talk about a different type of bottleneck, which is the flagship bottleneck. And again, the lovely thing about you being author and stuff like that is you can make up shit and people think you're clever. So this is me being clever here. The flagship bottleneck, and it is a bottleneck that's like really important. It's like the Navy. It's like that aircraft carrier, which the whole armada, if that's the right term these days, is there to kind of like keep that thing running. So it's the flagship. Now, I'm going to give you another little example here. So I'm going to start with 3 examples which have nothing to do with the world that we live in, the techie world of Kanban, etc. And then I'm going to show you a little Venn diagram-y thing down the bottom of the screen there. That's my Thrive model from the ATM method, my AgileToC method. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you that and show you how the bottleneck fits into it. And then I'm going to take the metaphor of the flagship, and I'm going to show you how to apply it into software development. And I think you'll find it fascinating and also, unfortunately, a little bit bamboozling, because this is what I'm going to tell you is really obvious, but it's really hard to see it in the real world. So I'm going to try and, more than anything else, just help you see bottlenecks in software development systems. So, oh, it's gone blank, which is a good thing. You see those 2 chairs? These aren't the real 2 chairs in this story. And this isn't even my story, which is really...
You cannot see your screen anymore.
Oh, is the screen gone for everyone?
I've got it.
No, I can see it.
Just me then. Okay.
It'll probably come back if you turn everything off and on. I don't know what to do now. Panic. So there's two chairs on the screen, and these aren't the real two chairs. But in this story, I wife's a doctor, and I'm a TOC geek, and together we once went to a TOC for medicine conference, which was really cool. And this English CEO of three big hospitals, he got up and he put a picture up like this, and he started off apologizing. These aren't the two real chairs. These are just taken in my lounge. But I managed, by going and getting two chairs from one of my hospitals basements, two chairs that I had to buy, I just had to go get them. I managed to, with the sake of getting two chairs, increase the throughput of my ophthalmic surgeries team by 23%. Again, two chairs, and he almost got a quarter more patients seen. Okay, so that's big. And then he explains the story, and it's kind of relevant to that because, whoop, I've got to push the right button there. If you can just imagine, these are doing ophthalmic surgery. I don't think they are with big tubes like that, but I've no idea. And just imagine that this is the surgeon, and we're going to say that he is he's a flagship resource, kind of like that. You know, it's really all the other ones there, they're more doing support, but he is the flagship. He's the one that's doing the surgery. You can swap others in and out. If he does 5 surgeries in a week, that's brilliant. If he does 10 surgeries in a week, that's twice as much. And everyone else kind of in the team is there to support him. So back to the chairs. The CEO, he says, I got a new job as a CEO. And first thing that happened once I got my feet under the desk is all of these people come to me asking for me to spend money in their area. And so I'd listen to them because, you know, I had a bit more money, the new job and stuff. And one group came to me, the ophthalmic surgeons, so the ones that do eye surgery. They came to me and they said, look, we need another surgery, you know, another actually physical operating kind of room. And we need to do that. And it will cost a fortune. We know this, but at the moment we have a great big waiting list, months and months and months. And the only way we can go faster is if we have another operating room. He goes, okay, cool, good. I'll look into it. So he looks into things and he discovers that they're running at about 110% capacity, or you know, basically that they're working long hours, and he doesn't like that because, especially with ophthalmic surgery, you know, that's microsurgery on people's eyes. He doesn't want people tired. And then he kind of just goes and meets him. So I see this as important. I'm just worried, you guys, do I actually need to ask you to work fewer hours? I know it's going to make things worse, but do I need to ask you that? Because I don't want us risking the patients. And they said, oh, no, it's all right. We get tons of breaks during the day. Okay, cool. Yeah, we get tons of breaks. So we are well rested.
Que tener la grabación, nada más. Y dije, voy a abrir la liga, pero no esperaba que no tuviera, que el altavoz estuviera perdido. ¿Seguro? Seguro.
Thank you. So he says, oh, okay, so you're well rested, but you're working long hours. All right. Why are you so well rested? Why do you get these breaks during the day? And the doctors say, oh, well, you know what it's like. We do our surgery, right? And then as we start to wrap up, we ask one of the nurses, could they arrange for the next patient to come down? And, you know, that's all well and good. We give them 10, 15 minutes notice. That's plenty of time because the patients are just waiting, you know, 100 meters down that way in the reception area. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, good. So why do you get the break? It was, oh, well, when we call through, the patient can't walk down here themselves. You know, they could, but they're not allowed to. They've got to get a porter, of course, you know, to and a wheelchair to wheelchair them down here for safety reasons and bring them to the operating theatre. Oh, okay, right. So why do you get the breaks? You go, oh, you know what it's like. You give them 10, 15 minutes notice, and they go down there, but and they try and get the porter, but the porter's busy doing stuff. or they can't get a wheelchair, or maybe the patient's wandered off to the loo and has come back, or something there, and they're just not sometimes it just takes longer. There are delays. There's a few of them each day, and that's quite good. We get a bit of a break. We go, okay, cool. So he goes down to the basement. He gets 2 chairs out of storage. He brings them up and he sits them outside the surgery bit. And he says, how about from now on, rather than getting your patients to wait in the waiting area, you get them to wait outside the surgery area so that they're there. And when you give them 10, 15 minutes to get prepped, they're there and waiting. And they did that. And the throughput, their productivity effectively shot up by 23%. Does that make sense? Just a thumbs up. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. It's one of those things when you look at it, you go, why didn't they do that? It's just so obvious. Okay, so now, and it is obvious, but so that's one of the things of the theory of constraints, right? The chairs weren't the bottleneck, the surgeon was the bottleneck. And if he and the team that was wrapped around him and all the other resources, which includes chairs and all sorts of other things, if they could go from doing 4 patients in the morning to 5 patients in the morning, because they cut out those little delays, that was a roughly 23% improvement. Now, the thing that I'm talking about here, that it all revolves around the person, in this case, who's the flagship resource, the one that has that special set of skills that determines the speed of the whole thing. You could have, actually, I'll leave it at that. I think that it's kind of fairly obvious for that, but I want to show you just a couple of other examples. So the chairs were support resources. Just notice here that we have flagship resources and support resources. And yes, I will sometimes call people resources, but there's all sorts of resources, and it's nothing personal in this case. Right, now we go back to this one here. Now, I hope you can see this. This was a free video that comes with Canva, but you can just imagine this little this aircraft carrier here. It looks like it's coming out of a harbour, and as it travels to wherever it's going, it's going to get a lot more ships. But this one here is obviously the flagship. This is the one. At the end of the day, they don't care about all the other ships that are around it. They want the aircraft carrier to travel to wherever they're going to sit there menacingly with the aircraft, and they don't want to be slowed down by all the other ships. Okay, so if these were the other ships, they may well be tugboats in this picture, but just pretend they're frigates, and maybe they're submarines, and maybe they're aircraft support, and all sorts of other ships, these fuel supply ships, all sorts of things there. And they're traveling as an armada, and that one is the most important ship. Everything else there that travels with it is a support ship. And we want the flagship ship to travel as fast as we can. So could you imagine if someone comes along and says, oh, we're going to give you a dinghy, and we're actually going to pop one of the pilots in there, and the pilot, she'll have to row alongside this, but you've still got to all travel as a fleet together. That would just be silly, wouldn't it? You don't want any of the support ships to be slower than the flagship, because if you did, the whole fleet and the flagship would run at the speed of the slowest ship. Okay, so what we're saying here is that we deliberately want that aircraft carrier and the surgeon to be treated like the bottleneck, and we want all the other types of resource, the machines, the people, the chairs, the submarines, to have more capacity and more speed, so that the flagship resource runs as fast as it can, or to put it another way, isn't slowed down by the other support ones. Okay, I'll give you another example here. Now, this isn't my friend's son, because they live in Ireland and this is too sunny, and it's a picture I got off the internet, right? But one of my wife's, one of her best friends, her son does that stuff, and it was either a 24-mile race or a 24-hour race, and I think it might have been 24 hours. It probably makes a difference because I know they had to set up a support crew around him because he's in this big long race, and it was like this all Ireland race, and he ended up winning it. Yay! But I want to give you this example because he was like the flagship of this racing team. So he was the one that did the heavy pedaling, the heavy lifting, and around him you had people operating as the support crew. What you had is his mum and his dad and I think a brother, each taking turns to drive in separate cars so that they were always at the next spot when he needed water or foot massages, or I don't know what you do with cyclists, but they were always there. He was running at this speed, cycling at this speed, and they were in their cars racing ahead, and then racing ahead to the next spot, and always there because their job was to support him. So he was the flagship resource, and they were there to support him. And of course, they couldn't do it if they were walking, because he would have to stop and then wait for them to catch up. They needed to be faster and more flexible and more agile, if you like that, than he was, and they had to treat him as a deliberate bottleneck. Deliberate bottleneck. He was the bottleneck, and they packed in the capacity around him with all the other resources so he could perform as best as he could and not be slowed down by the support team. And Liat, a very good example. Formula One is a good example. And I would actually come back to this. I should have put it in here as an example, so thank you for that. Think of the pit crew in a Formula One. You've got the car out there, meow, 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 making those annoying waspy sounds. And then they come into the pit crew, and the pit crew is already, they're sitting there. They've got everything prepped, just like putting that chair in front of the surgeon, and they're sitting there and they are waiting. Then the car comes in and they pounce and as quick as they can. And then once the car goes off, they prep for the next time the car comes in, and then they have a little rest and they just wait there. Because what they want to have is proactive, reactive capacity. They want to have enough spare capacity that they can be quick, because it would be stupid if they said, oh, let's share pit crew. And then one car comes in and they go, oh, I'll just sit here and wait till the pit crew is finished on the other car. So really simple idea, right? It's you've got a flagship resource. Not every system has a flagship resource, but if you've got one, then you want to make sure that you have plenty of capacity in all the other resources around them. Otherwise, the flagship will do less work. And even better than that, if you have a flagship resource and they don't have enough support and they're suddenly slowed down for some reason by other stuff around them, you can get enormous improvements just by small investments, sometimes like getting 2 chairs and setting them up so that the bottleneck doesn't waste time. Okay. Right. So now we have a chart. It's very exciting. Now, here's our flagship resource. See the vertical axis here, it's just relative capacity. And that's kind of, here, I'll show you that. So you see that one there? There's one of the support resources in whatever situation. They have more capacity relative to the flagship. So for instance, say it was the surgeon, and we plotted out, they could, let's say that was let's say it was 8 a day, 8 surgeries they could do a day. And they're plotted on the chart there. And then the nursing capacity, we have enough to do 12. And because they've got more than enough to do 8, they've got flexibility. And it might look like a waste, but it actually means that they can be proactively reactive, and they can set things up and they don't slow down the flagship. So that's all this is just showing. Some resources have more capacity relative to the others. And it's a good thing if the flagship is the one with the least capacity, if they're the bottleneck. So you look at that. And it kind of looks like that. So that would be well set up. Can you imagine if one of those little flags here, the support ones, was lower than the flagship, then the whole system would run at the speed of that particular resource or resource type, because it would be the bottleneck. And that would kind of be stupid. Can you imagine if you your surgery was slowed down by 20% because you didn't have 2 chairs sitting outside the surgery? That would just be silly. Could you imagine if that ran on for years and you thought you had to build another surgery operating theatre to service more patients? Okay, now you may not have seen this, but did you notice that that little line at the bottom, it was dotted, and then I pushed the arrow just a little bit too quickly and it changed into an arrow. So I pushed the arrow on my key and I changed it into an arrow. That's because I'd just like you to imagine now that this is a flow system. Okay, now not all systems are flow systems like we're familiar with, but you can also look at every system and find, if you look at it with the right angle and stuff, that if they added a few little more resources here, even though it's not a flow system, that they would actually get more done. But we're lucky that we work in a flow system. And if you look at the patients, they work in a flow system. The cyclist, that's got movement to it. So it feels like a flow system of sorts. But we work in a flow system. And so we've got stuff here. Forgive my handwriting here. We got stuff here. And I just want to introduce these words. They're upstream and downstream. So we're going to have some resources in a flow system that are upstream of the flagship. In other words, they do stuff before it gets to the flagship bottleneck. And then we're going to have people who are after the flagship bottleneck, and they're downstream. And we're also going to have, I'm going to just above and around. So this might sound like a stupid example, but it's true. Many years ago, I worked on a software development project with about 250 people in it, and the bottleneck was the number of meeting rooms. Okay, they'd done this really clever thing. They'd given everyone, they'd taken all the desks out over one weekend, replaced all the desks with smaller desks, and then moved a whole bunch of people in there. And so desks weren't a problem, apart from no, actually, I won't go into the details of that, but suddenly there weren't enough meeting rooms for people to work together. So that's not like really a flow system. It's just a general lack of stuff, and everything was limited because of the number of meeting rooms. It's really weird. It did make everyone look really busy, which and productive, but they weren't actually productive. They were just busy. Okay, so you've also got people here. Imagine the you've got, like, in a flow system, you might have managers of the system. Like in our world, we might have scrum masters or delivery managers. We might have other people who, say, are shared across teams, say perhaps there's UX and they're shared across teams, and they kind of fit into the flow, but they're also kind of more general than that. Okay, don't worry about that in detail. I just want you to see this here. And I want you, if I get rid of that, to just notice that is kind of a U shape. And when I say that, I know all the New Zealanders are getting excited because they've heard me and they think I'm talking about female sheep, but I'm actually talking about the letter U that looks like that, the smiley face shape. Okay. Yep. That's going to come handy in a few minutes. And before that, I have to wander off in a slightly different direction. So let me just pause just there for a moment and I've just been trying to show you there are 2 types of resource. There's the flagship resource, and then there's all of the support ones. And I just want you to notice the U shape there, because this is about a thing called U-shaped timer teams. And it's about getting the bottleneck at the right place and working on the right stuff deliberately. And to muddy things here, it's all around this idea of software development teams having a flagship resource. And if I haven't bamboozled you with too many jargony words there, I shall move on. Okay. Now, if you happen to have a phone on you, It may or may not be useful to do this. I don't know. I did a talk yesterday. It was kind of handy because it got some of the same stuff. If you take a picture of that, it'll take you to a picture of that other thing next to it. And that's called the Thrive model. And it comes from the AgileToC Method, the ATM. And that's where this stuff comes in. It's the combination of Agile and the theory constraints, and you'll just get that picture. It might be handy to have it there in front of you. I'm not quite sure, depending on how the conversation goes. So, okay, I'll come back to some of those comments later. So you've got that there, lovely diagram. Now I must point out, Vinny, I noticed, was from Perth, Australia. I paid a man in Perth, Australia, $10,000, sorry, to help me come up with that diagram, which is ridiculous because I help other people come up with diagrams like that, and I couldn't do it for myself. I don't know if you're used to that. There's that kind of thing where you kind of almost can't fix yourself. So I hired someone to help me, and we put, this is kind of my life's work, which has been in much detail spread across, books like this and this, and it's got 49 words in it, I think, which works out at $200 a word roughly. So please just go, wow. Every word I mention here cost me $200. So I hope it's worth it for you, right? So it is a silly thing. SAFE, you're all familiar with SAFE, and you can roll your eyes if it makes you feel happier. I remember about 8 years ago, and it's kind of like the thing that made me realize I needed something like this to collate and kind of nicely just show the big picture of what I do and how TOC and Agile can work together. And I noticed that it was about 10, probably more than that, 10 years ago, roughly. It was one of the early SAFE diagrams. I had a program manager who came to me and said, I've just been given this diagram. Look at it. We need all of that. And I looked at it, and it was SAFE. It was the SAFE model at that stage. And he'd looked at it and fallen in love with it, because it just looked complete and perfect, and everything he wanted was on there. And he liked it that the little team bits that we probably focus on most, they were just little bits at the bottom of the diagram. They had all this other stuff, and I looked at it because I was familiar with SAFE, and we were talking about Martin Burns earlier before we kicked off, I went and said, I had lunch with Martin, because Martin was a big proponent of SAFE, and he said to me, hey, look, the diagram is just huge, because what it does is it gives people confidence when they look at it, and it gives the big picture, and people can tick it off. And I said, but I've looked at the diagram, we have everything in there that's currently in the SAFE model. It just doesn't have those names. And he said, oh yeah, you probably, maybe you don't need it, but you'll find that your managers in particular really resonate with a diagram like that, and I've found ever since that they did, and they also like the word. Now, I'm not dismissing SAFE. This stuff works with SAFE, it works with Kanban, it works with Agile, it works with all of that stuff, but there's some stuff that if we want people to adopt things that anyway, if we want people to adopt things, there's a little secret here. Having a little diagram that makes you look cleverer than you are is really useful. So that's what that is. And there's another bit, the name. Okay, so you know what a SAFE is if you go into a bank. It's one of those things there, and it's where you put the money. It is safe, and if people hear the name SAFE, it feels safe. So if you haven't noticed, the AgileToC method stands for ATM, which is the same name as the money machine. And I don't apologize for that. I feel a little bit awkward because it's not all about making money, but this is a really good way of making money. And if you're already making money in your business, that maybe doesn't matter. But if you're in a business that's maybe doesn't matter to you, but if you're in a business and not going so great, it's really good if you can make a few tweaks to things, like the stuff I'm showing you with the U-shaped team, that helps you make a lot more money. And if you're trying to pitch Agile or Kanban to people who really don't care about the nitty gritty, the people who like SAFE, because it makes them feel safe, well, the people who they work for, their bosses, love the idea of making more money. So they love the idea of ATM because what more would they want from their Agile teams than to use them to be a money machine. Anyway, please note, right in the middle of this, it's not all about money. You see that heart in the middle of it? At the heart of this, there's three things. One is snowballing profits. And the word snowballing is really important. I'll come back to that shortly. It actually has a specific meaning, and I'll demonstrate what that is. Productive buzz, that's really important too, because we're all productivity geeks and we love things. We love that elegance of taking 2 chairs and putting them in front of a surgery, and it goes 23% faster. We love that kind of stuff. So productive buzz and collective calm. The reason collective calm is there is because I have found in my many years of doing this stuff, you can talk about culture, you can talk about all sorts of stuff. If you've got a culture where people feel productive, but it's also nice and calm, and they're making money, it's a really, really lovely place to work. You end up with a thriving workplace. So it's not just all about the money, but if you don't have the money, trust me here, as someone who's been made redundant 3 times, it's really nice to work in a place that is making money. Right, now, you see over here, see the right place bottleneck? Okay, so this is what we're going to go to next. This is the secret sauce of this session is how to get the bottleneck in the right place so that you go faster and in the right direction. But I still need to just show you something here. Okay, who's heard of forming, storming, norming, and performing? Everyone? Yeah, okay, so cool. Yeah, it was come from a guy called Bruce Tuckman, who also has a really cool limerick that he features and that I can't mention. And I'm just waiting, please someone smile, because no one smiled at that yet, ever. They were all too polite. So Bruce Tuckman, he came up with the forming, storming, norming, and performing model. And what that was is if you've got a team and they have to form, okay, then they form, you get all these people and all their opinions and beliefs and the hierarchy and pecking orders and all that kind of stuff, and you get them together and then they storm. They kind of, it's a bit of a rough period where they boom, 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 and then after a while, they kind of sort things out and people figure out where they fit and how to work with each other, and they buff off the rough edges of the team, and then they start norming. So form, storm, norm, and then over time, in theory, as they get better and better and better, they start to perform. One of the downsides of that model is that people have realized is that if you change people in the team, they actually go through the cycle again, which is one of the reasons we like stable teams so much, because when you have unstable teams, you've got to go through that storming again, and it can often be quite unpleasant. Well, this is the same idea, but different. I've just stolen those 4 names because honestly, I try to come up with my own names, but the form, storm, and norm just work so well, and it's kind of similar. So this is based on, I've been doing Agile for it's reminding me to put my rubbish out, and I have done that already. This is based on years of doing, almost 20 years now of doing Agile. And when you look at Agile, they kind of go through these 4 stages you can see here. And so in the early days, we were trying to form Agile kind of from the bottom up. It was a lot of little people in teams who were trying to get like-minded individuals to do stuff, and that maybe have a little bit of success, and then a manager would leave and come in and they squish it. And it was very much, kind of bottom up, and it never really, it was always really hard. And then over time, as people started seeing it working, a lot more businesses and non-businesses made a choice, which I'm calling it choice 1, was that they had got enough knowledge and comfort that they no longer felt fearful of it or ignorant about how to do it. They just decided to invest in it because it was a really good idea. So then you got a whole lot more people, probably working with people, like us, giving them help. And we went into suddenly a storming phase. That bit where you go through a transformation and it's like, it's really, really got 25% of the people loving it because they're finally getting what they want and having all sorts of, cheerleading and meetings and debates and stuff. And it's great fun. You got 75% of people go, here we go again, another transformation. And they're trying to figure out stuff. And the whole organization, or at least the bits that's transforming, and their customers go through this storming phase. And it can be really exciting, and it can be really, really painful and brutal as well. But this is just the way things get done. And the beautiful thing of that is you keep at it and you hire enough good coaches and consultants to help you get through the rough stuff quickly, and actually start turning your transformation into money, and other many wonderful benefits. Then you get to the norming phase. And then when you get to there, that's really cool. It's really neat because everything's running really well. And if you look at it, whenever you go to a conference, if those things still exist, you go to a conference and people come up and they give you a success story. It sounds like they're performing, or norming or performing, because people only ever tell the good stories in this, and they've got all a lovely sort of story about how well it's working. And it is a good place to be. It's a really good place once you've got past that storming and you're now into the norming phase, and you settle down and go, you know what, we're doing Kanban really well, or we're doing Agile really well. That safe thing, it was a pain in the ass when we first looked at it, but we figured out how to work around the boring bits, and it's working well, and people like it. So people have kind of got a bit of a smiley face there, and they're actually getting quite good at this. Now, notice here, choice 2. I think most Agile implementations, by which I mean Kanban as well, most of them get to a point, so some of them get beyond this point, they keep pushing, but there's some stuff where they look at it, and do you remember that film with Jack Nicholson, As Good as It Gets? It's kind of like, if you look at the Agile system, if you look at all the comments you see on LinkedIn and Twitter and all that kind of stuff, you just look, a lot of people hate it. And you just go, why did they hate it? Why? And you just wonder, is this as good as it gets? Especially when you look at the customers, or the executives, or the head of marketing, who look at it and say, yeah, you guys are all doing really interesting. I'm sure it's really good. But all our competitors are also doing Agile. I don't know if we're any better than them. And honestly, actually, you guys won't give me, you won't promise to deliver stuff on time. And I need some of this stuff on time because I've got like year-end things. And if you deliver me something in March and I was hoping to hit the Christmas rush, that doesn't help me. And really, I look and you all seem busy, but I don't know if you're that fast. You feel a bit sluggish. It's reasonable to ask. In a lot of places, people do ask, is this actually as good as it gets? And so one of the things I'm going to show you that will fix up some of those problems is getting the bottleneck in the right place. Because once you get beyond that, you get into really performing. And now, if I were just to characterize the difference between norming and performing at a really, really simple level, in norming, everyone is really, 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 really busy. In performing, they're more focused. Everyone's not as busy. Everything's actually calmer. And they're not as busy. If you just wanted like a shortcut way to know if the chicken is cooked, it's really, really busy versus actually not as busy, but there's more stuff coming out. Okay, so that's the Agile life cycle as I've seen it. And of course, you see there's some choices coming up. One of them is whether you do projects or not. And the answer, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but yes, you do projects, even if it's in a product environment. They're not mutually exclusive. If the projects are really important, and you want them, and timeliness is actually really important to your business, because there's nothing worse than a project that takes a year longer and makes your business go broke and then makes you redundant afterwards. Right. So now, I'm going to get back to these bottlenecks in a bit, but I just need to show you this bit here. So this is an iceberg. So just imagine here, I think this reflects the state of Agile as it is, and probably as it has been for the last 20 years, is that we are, most of us, focused on these things. Think tools, coaching, conferences. You've got new roles. We're always constantly reinventing things. And these things are so cool, aren't they? I love all of these things. But new frameworks. I've just shown you a sexy diagram with 49 words in it that, it's just really cool. We love this stuff. And we debate things like, are we doing or being Agile? Or what's best, Kanban or Scrum or Safe? Or, we're focused on all of this stuff. And at that level, it's actually quite shallow. And I just want to bring you back down, just a level lower. because I think there's more depth underneath the sea level in what we're doing. And I've already mentioned it. I've shown you the 3 words that were at the heart of the diagram. Is this productive buzz, collective calm, and snowballing profits. And now, if you love all of the technique stuff, you might find this a little bit, I'm not sure, purposeful, or it's not virtue signaling for me. I just think this is really important. And I want to just tell you a little bit about a story that genuinely happened to me 40 years ago, about 30 miles that way in rural New Zealand, where I don't think they can still get 3G signal even. I went to visit a farm with my mum and dad and my younger brother, and these guys were, the family was real, they were rough. The kids were feral, and they had 2 boys, and the mum and dad were delighted to have 2 kids there, and they said, right, show the boys around the farm. My brother and I got whisked away, and we went walking around the farm with these 2 kids that were trotting like this, and their knuckles dragging on the ground. And then we come up to this old shearing shed, and on the outside the shearing shed, the boys stopped and they pointed at it. You could see a little hole, and there were lots of bees, wild bees flying into this. And cool, we'd never seen a wild beehive before. And the boy said, should we throw rocks at it? And we go, we didn't know any better. They didn't know any better. So we all started throwing rocks at it. And now this beehive had, at that stage, if you think about it, they'd been productive. You could hear them buzzing. They're out there collecting honey. Honey's kind of like their version of profits or money. They were collecting the stuff, turning it into honey, and it was all really good. And then 4 little bastards come along and started chucking rocks at them. And they had been calm. And then the calmness disappeared. And they got really angry. And they all raced out and they chased after us. And the 3 older boys ran away quickly. And the one that was at the back, kind of a bit like that joke about the athlete that puts the shoes on, and the other guys there, when the lion comes to chase them, and he says, I only have to outrun you. My little brother was at the back of it. And this is the long story of how he discovered he's allergic to bees. And we were 90 minutes away from the nearest doctor. So I'm pointing that out because calmness is almost like the opposite of productiveness. And one of the things that I've picked up from seeing agile teams, and especially when you've got the TOC angle on it, when you look at teams and they're actually really busy, they are calm. You look, they feel safe because they know they've got enough money coming in, that their jobs are doing well. They know that they're actually able to sit, and they've got good equipment. They're busy working away and stuff, and they're being productive, and it's nice and calm. But if you take away the productivity, or if you take away the profit, then suddenly environments can turn nasty, kind of like that beehive did, and it can end up really unpleasant and stressful. So I think calm is an underrated measure. I think it's so important. I popped it in my top 3 here, and I think you get all of those 3 things together. And I particularly want to point out that in theory constraints, a lot of people think it's all about money, but for me, money's only one of the 3 things. So now let me just move on here. I'm conscious I'm reliving my youth here. So the bit here, and I hope this doesn't feel twee, but I've put a lot of effort and thought into this. And I think the reason, and I think this will resonate with all of you, that I think that anyone who works on adopting agile, Kanban, safe, whatever you want to call it, and works hard at that, I think we all deserve to have those 3 things. But what we actually have is really a thriving workplace. So, and I'm belaboring this because I don't want you to think, because it's ATM, that it's all about the money. It's much more important than this. If you do these things right, and if you move beyond the norming to the performing stage, you end up with a thriving workplace. And that's where this model comes in. And I'm going to get to the good stuff in just a sec. There's the model again, but I need to go back to the money bit. And I hope that after you see this, you'll go, oh, I didn't know that, but it's bloody obvious. Okay, so that's what I'm hoping for. You all know cost of delay. You're kind of, yep, familiar with cost of delay. Right, so let me just show you a little example where cost of delay is really, it's brilliant framing. It frames things as a loss which is great for selling and marketing and getting people to take action. No one likes the idea of losing, like in this example here, $1 million a month, but it also sub-optimizes on individual projects and it misses the big picture. And I just want to show you this because I think this is, when I realized this, I felt stupid and I presumed everyone knew it, but it turns out that not everyone does. So imagine we've got this little parallel universes, and in one of the universes, each project takes 4 months, and they're all identical projects for some reason. So in that universe, they can do 3 projects a month. Okay, so there's nothing tricky about this. But then in universe 2, each project takes 3 months, so they can do 4 projects in a year. That's pretty cool. Okay, now there's an interesting thing here because you go, oh, it's 25% more. You'll make 25% more money, but it doesn't actually work that way. Now, each of these projects has a cost of delay of $1 million. That means the moment it goes live, that project, the project's finished, whatever it was doing, the organization is making $1 million extra money, or they're saving $1 million. Okay, so it's $1 million cost of delay, really, really useful. That frames people. They look at that and go, oh, that's a lot of money. We've got to manage the scope on this. Really careful, guys. We need to be efficient and effective, because it's $1 million a month. Now, there's a trick here, because every project does have a cost of delay of $1 million a month. And let me just show you the first one. See that there? Project 1 and universe 2 finishes 1 month earlier. So it's going to make $1 million extra for that company, which is brilliant. But now there's an interesting thing with project 2, is that it not only takes 1 month less, which is good news because of some magic fairy dust we've sprinkled over universe 2, but it starts a month earlier. So you see the gap there? There's 2 months. So that makes $2 million. And then in project 3, it starts 2 months earlier, takes 1 month less, so there's 3 million. And if I had a widescreen and more keynote animation skills, this would scroll across and you see 4 months, 5 months, 4 million, 5 million, 6 million. And now you know the idea of a snowball. It starts out tiny, and then you turn it over and it gets bigger. And then the next turn, it wraps more snow around it, it gets bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger. And then eventually, if it's at the top of a hill, it's rolling over and over and over. It gets so big that as it rolls downhill, it knocks over some poor kid who gets enveloped in it, and that's the last you ever see of them. That's snowballing. I don't know what the mathematical thing of this, but the value of delivering something a month earlier over and over and over again is huge. It's far, far more than we would think of. It gets bigger and bigger with every turn of the snowball. Okay, so just wanted to show you that, because snowballing profits is, that word is really, really, really deliberate. And if you happen to be in an area where you wanted to encourage people to do this kind of stuff, ideally you would sit down with the people who like safe, the managers, and you would show them this little example here. And then you say, look, if we want to do this stuff, why don't you go and have a chat with the CEO and the CFO and just frame it and how much money they're actually losing by not letting our teams run optimally. It's a lot more than they will ever realize. Okay, so that's part of the sales pitch. So that's not just information. I hope that's actually useful, something that you can think of, because they won't realize that the way people calculate the value of projects is it sub-optimizes, and it doesn't take this starting stuff earlier into account. Liet, you have a question there. Did I pronounce your name correctly? I don't think I did. Hey, hello, cool.
Well done. Just a quick question. While you were explaining that, the first thing that came to my mind is actually multitasking and change of context really soon, because maybe in here it's actual projects, but a lot of time what happens is that we switching content. Yes. And then that's exactly where we fall. because even biologically, our brain is not capable of doing that. And by switching, we're actually losing that time constantly.
Yep. So you are absolutely right, but you're also wrong on one little bit, which is that so you're absolutely right. And it's very analogous to this. And actually last week, I did a session with one of my clients where they've got 300 million a year in revenue in this one division. And it was about asking and about some of the other stuff I'm going to show you in, actually, I don't have room to show you in here, but the two things are very, very similar. And one of it, what it shows you is that the cost of switching is actually tiny compared to the cost of diluting the effort and making every project actually run in parallel, lots of WIP, and they get really diluted, and it delays everything for starting enormously. Maybe Silky, maybe I come back and I could just run through that one. Or if anyone's really keen and they want, LinkedIn message me and I'll send you the multitasking simulation. It's a bit more complicated than this, but it's absolutely startling how much, and the context switching stuff is almost, it's a lot, but it's nothing compared to the dilution effect of delaying and making projects take much longer. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Right, thank you. Right, now I will move on here. So there we go. There's the heart of the ATM model. And
Clarke,
I'm not going to go through this. Hello. Someone
this
say
is
something?
me, Silky. Yes, I was
Hello.
actually think because you mentioned my name anyway, because I kept wondering about this, because a lot of times I find that we talk a lot too much about team level things, and not enough about the dependencies across teams and how we actually get to better working across the organization, across teams. Is that what you actually mean by that?
No, the multitasking thing is a bit different. But it's kind of like the WIP thing. If you, yeah, it is actually at a bigger level. But rather than saying we have multiple teams, we have multiple projects, and each of them are sharing resources. And for the sake of fairness, they move between the resources, which means that a task that might take, say it took a week, if it's shared, the resource doing most of the work in it is shared between 3 people, it'll be diluted and take 3 weeks. And then if you've got a project that was going to take 6 months, suddenly it's going to take 18 months, and everyone will look really busy. But the cost of delaying that will take a 6-month project and turn it into an 18-month project, and you lose a year's worth of the cost of delay, and much more than that, and it's huge.
Yeah.
Daniel.
And that as opposed of just multitasking, right? Because multitasking is on an individual team level.
No, multitasking can run between projects as well, and quite often you'll get that. You get one, say one person could. So imagine you have a
someone
UX
in the
team.
toilet there. Was it a flush?
I don't know. How's all going awkward? How about I come back at some stage and I'll run through the multitasking stuff, because it's kind of like that snowball effect. It's actually worse than that. Daniel, did you want to? No. Oh, you're on mute. The body language is, you're still muted.
Sorry. Clarke, just to be clear, what you were doing then was saying a lot of people miss out on the true impact of understanding cost of delay, not something unique to your method.
Yeah, it's just invisible. Most people, adding cost to delay is an amazing thing because it suddenly gets people making better decisions. But the actual value of it, rather than snowballing profits, it's just extending everything, so it takes a lot longer. It's much more devastating.
Right. So this is a lesson about communication of the full impact and of cost of delay, rather than cost of delay in relationship to theory of constraints, agile, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
This would apply to any good application.
It applies to absolutely everything. It's just that most of us who've adopted cost of delay as a way of getting people to make better decisions, haven't seen the full picture of it.
Right. They're just going, okay, this is the prioritization framework which we're using now, which is a bit more quantified, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it becomes a calculation rather than a serious high-level business decision. You go, wow, if we let that thing there, add in all those extra features, that doesn't just mean that project will deliver 2 months later. It means that every other project ever afterwards will start 2 months later and deliver the results 2 months later, and we just lose that money over and over again.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Right, I will figure out how to press that. Okay, so I'm going to run through this quickly. I'm not going to give you the whole walkthrough. If anyone wants to, I could go through it again at some stage, but I really want to focus on right placing the bottleneck, because this is just so useful, because you guys have all got the Kanban-y stuff in your head. So I've known David for a long time. I think I hosted his first live session where he did a Kanban. He's Scottish. He used to stay with me when he came home. But Kanban did a wonderful thing, and it took small batches, limited work, really good, got it spread all around the world. But it kind of it took out the bottleneck stuff that it's hard to sell this stuff and make the TOC stuff sound nearly as interesting as Kanban. And so I think people miss out on this. And I want to show you why it's so important not to just do the stuff you know about from this book, because this book gives you the wrong answer if you want to apply it. Or that book, or that book. If you just take the straight thing, find your bottleneck, and then manage it, you'll end up with the bottleneck in the wrong place. So those are all good books, especially the first two I showed you. So we have here, right place the bottleneck, curate the cache, and then synchronize the whole system. Whole system, team of teams, and of multiple projects running on. To come back what you were talking about there, Silky, you have a bottleneck in your whole system unless you can keep your teams totally and utterly independent of each other. Now, on the project side, what is really, I'm going to give you a really recommendation, but I don't want to go into this. This book here is bloody expensive, and so it should be, because it teaches you how to put value and dollar signs on the value into conversations. It's called the Dollarization Principle, and it's really expensive. But if you're interested in making money, it's kind of like step one, because most of us are building software. If you're actually trying to deliver dollars or euros for our friends in Poland and Holland, this is a really good start. It's about how to think about the value that you get from your products and your projects. Invert the pyramid. I'm not going to go into that detail, but it's basically how you set up agile projects to deliver the most valuable stuff at the beginning, and then ever decreasing value, and then you stop when you hit your date, variable scope, but a bit more than that. And stacking the deck, just really quickly, if you're playing cards, stacking the deck's cheating. If you're doing projects, most projects fail because they don't do enough work at the start of the project to set it up to succeed. Almost by default, they set it up for failing. And we, with our bias towards action, are partly responsible for that. We want to get started. We want to get feedback. We want to get all those good things. But there's some stuff that happens above and outside of what most teams see that can set up projects so that they're far more successful. And they're usually just hard conversations, hard grown-up commercial conversations. And then, now I'm going to not talk anything about quiet change. This is the weird thing, and this is what I do in most of my work. It's helping executives, it's helping people cause change to happen in a way that's nice and quiet. And I'm not going to talk about it, apart from to say that the theory constraints gives you the focus of where to make changes very precisely, like a corporate acupuncture. We've got this thin needle and we do it there. And agile gives you the incremental delivery mechanism. And when you combine those two, you can cause change in a nice, quiet way. And if you talk about a calm workplace, the one thing that I get over and over, maybe people see this, is that they're sick of being overwhelmed with the amount of constant change, and they don't know if it actually makes things better or if it just makes everyone feel like it's moving. And then there's three things in there. I don't want to go on this. I'm over talking this. Sorry. So right place the bottleneck. Now, remember here, we're trying to build a profitable system that's nice and calm, and everyone's productive. Okay, so that's our over, and so we have a nice thriving workplace. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an existing Agile or Kanban or whatever you want to call it. It's all the same stuff. When you look at it from high enough down, we're building small chunks of high quality, well-engineered working software, and we're delivering it often, and we're ideally doing the most important stuff first. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add the bottleneck stuff on top of it. But we're not just going to go finding the bottleneck and manage it, which would be a really good start. We're going to make sure the bottleneck's in the right place. And we know that in some systems, we have a really important bottleneck, the flagship bottleneck. We've seen 3 examples there. We go, oh yeah, that makes sense. So you've seen the U shape. Doesn't look like a sheep, it looks like a smiley face, right? There's also an N shape or a frowning T like this. Most teams actually have an N-shape resource. Remember, that's relative capacity up here. Remember relative capacity. Most teams, if I go back, don't look like that. They look like that. Okay, so I could have told you this at the beginning, but you probably wouldn't have believed me, and you still may not believe me, but the flagship resource in your software development teams is your developers. If surgeons cut up people, the developers cut the code. Okay. If you had a system where the developers were doing really good work 3 days a week, and you could bump that up to 4 days a week, that would be huge. So I'm claiming here that the developers, it doesn't mean anyone else is less important. It's just the other roles are all support roles, apart from this particular role here. Hang on, and for some reason, you know what? I'm clicking my Apple Pencil and it's making the animation start. So no, I'll just leave it there. So the flagship resource is the developers. Okay. Now I'm going to say it again. The flagship resource is the developers, and you could do what I've done for the last 10 years and try and prove me wrong. And you might be able to do that in 0.5% of situations, but almost always, if you want to deliver far more value, if you want to go faster in the right direction, you want to make sure that your developers are deliberately the bottleneck. Okay, so again, you can go and argue that this is not the case, but you want them to deliberately be the bottleneck, but you probably don't want to tell them they're the bottleneck. Actually, Dan, can I come back to you in a minute if you want to disagree with me? Let me just do this bit, or if you want to agree, either way. But just let me finish this moment here. If you have the bottleneck in any other place, and you're going to have a bottleneck no matter what, if you have it any other place, you will end up with very busy teams that are doing busy work or rework, or probably both. And they will look really productive and really busy because they are really busy, but they're not actually really productive. So what that means, you remember before I scribbled on upstream and downstream? So if we want upstream here, this part, we want the people who are upstream of the developers, and I'm including the internal customer, and I'm including product owner, whatever you call that particular role. I'm including analysts, the people who prepare stuff for the developers. No matter how small your stories are or how big they are, you want them to have enough capacity to think through things properly before they pass them in. You don't want them sitting there under pressure having to feed stuff to hungry developers just to keep them so that they have work to do. Because if they do, they'll do at least one of two things. The first thing that they'll do is they'll cut corners and they'll feed stuff into the developers and go, I wish I'd had another 2 or 3 days, but I'll tell you what, we're agile here. So if it goes into the thing and they build stuff and then I look at it and I don't like it, I'll just get them to change it. And that is how we work. But if they could put a little bit more thought and they weren't forced to cut corners, then they would feed much better stuff into the developers. I'm not talking about getting everything right up front, waterfall style. I'm just talking about having the capacity to think and get stuff as right as they sensibly can before they give it to the developers. Put it the other way, I'm specifically saying that they don't feel like they have to cut corners. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second one, which is even worse in a way, the cutting corners just causes either an inferior product or loads of rework to loop back around, right? Now, the second one is where you've got all these hungry developers and they're going, oh, we need work, we need work, we need work. And then the customer, the product owner, whatever you call these people, they're looking at it and go, oh, I've got 2 jobs. I'm the head of marketing and I'm also supposed to feed these hungry developers. And then they go, oh, I've got so much work, I hardly have time to do this properly. And then they look down their little list of things there and they go, oh, if I do that top one, it's really valuable. But I've got to put 6 weeks worth of preparation and discussion with vendors and before I can do that. It's a lot of work. And it's only going to probably cause 2 weeks worth of work for the developers. Oh, that's not very good. I don't have time to do that. And then they'll look down the list and then they'll find one halfway down the list and they'll go, oh, this looks interesting because it's not very valuable, this one here, but it's on the list, so it must have some value. And if I give that there, in about 2 days' time, 2 days' effort, I can get something that I feed to the development team who are starving for work and getting really grumpy at me. And it will keep them busy for 3 months. And they'll take that second choice because they try and keep the developers busy. Okay, so that's the upstream bit. And you've got the rework and you've got the busy work. Yeah. Swap over to the downstream side. This bit here. Now, did someone mention Formula One racing car pit crews before? Okay, remember that? Now, if there's one thing we've all learned over the years, feedback is fabulous, right? It's one of those basic things that we love. And one of the beautiful things about testers and just generally testing capacity, some might be people, some might be automated. One of the beautiful things about that is they give us feedback. And if they give us feedback quickly, that's really cool, right? Because if I'm a developer, I can go, hey, look, I've done this stuff. I'd really love to. Could you just, and the testers go off and do stuff and they give you a thumbs up or they come back and say, oh, that's, could you fix that? And so you've got time to fix it. We love fast feedback because we know that if you get slow feedback, what happens is the testers go, oh, I'll get back to you in 2 weeks' time. The developers go, oh, okay, I'll just start on some other stuff. And then they start something and our whip goes up and up and up. And then when they come back and they get the feedback from this other stuff, they don't even remember it. And our whip's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and everything's taking longer and longer and longer. So we want fast feedback and we want them to be, the testers to be like the pit crews, proactively reactive. And to do that, we need them to have plenty of capacity to be nice and quick. Okay. Now, I'll come back to you in a moment, Dan, because I just want to point out that most teams are actually like that red curve, the frowning N shape. Most teams, I swear this is true, you won't believe it till you go back and look at work. Most teams actually have far too many developers and not enough other resources around them to support them. And yet they look like they're the bottleneck because they're really busy, because they're doing rework and busy work. And so it's hard because if you go and look at the teams, everyone said, no, developers aren't the bottleneck. And I'll give you just a little example. 3 weeks ago, I met with a team, about 25 people in it, and I'm helping the leader of that team move from an N shape the frowning face to the smiley face U shape. I'm helping them twist that round. And the way they do that is they get more collaboration and more coordination, and they just get clever about things. But he's going, oh, I don't think we have that problem. Oh, okay, right. No, look, everyone's really busy. Right. Developers are really busy. Really, really, really busy. Go, oh, okay, cool. And he explains how busy everyone is. And I go and go, dead right. And then he just throws in passing. He said, you know, what's good though, is that we've actually got loads of time to fix up all of that, so much technical debt that we had. You go, oh, that's good. Got you. Yeah. Well, why have you got so much time to fix up that? Because I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It sounds like a really good thing. He goes, oh, well, our product people, you know, they're really good. We just don't have enough of them. So quite often we have to wait before they have stuff that's ready for us. So, okay, so you do the cleaning up. That's really cool. And as a side note, it's actually when you clean up technical debt, it actually makes the team go faster. The developers go faster, and it actually causes the end shape to get worse. But I said, oh, it sounds like the bottleneck is actually at the front of your system. It's actually the product people. He goes, yeah, I suppose it is actually. And it sounds like you have too many developers. Yeah. And I'm just trying to keep them busy all the time. So what we're doing through now is actually just figuring out, just say that you've effectively only got enough product capacity to provide 3 days work to the development team. And they are not actually doing rework and busy work. What they're doing is tidying up their system, which is virtuous. I said to him, look, if you've got that roughly 3 days, if you could bump that up so that there's 4 days worth of work, would that be good? Oh, that'd be brilliant, because we actually get sick of doing all this stuff. And, you know, there's so many customers out there. They want all this stuff from us, but they can't prep it in time. And we just love that. It takes so much pressure off. And so that's what we're doing. And the way he's doing that, the first thing is he's framed the problem. And then there's, oh, this is a problem. And I'm coaching him on how to have those difficult conversations to figure out how to get a product team and a development team collaborating and helping each other. Right, nearly there on this one. See the two things at the bottom? See the hourglass? So I call these U-shaped because of that diagram, timer teams. Now, it's not this sort of timer. It's this sort of timer, right? You might not know this, but that's a bottleneck in the middle of that hourglass. And if you look at our shape of our teams there, we actually, what I'm saying is you deliberately want to have your flagship resource be deliberately placed in the middle of your team. And then once it's there, you try and figure out how to get all of the capacity around it so that that little bit in the middle gets a little bit wider, increases the productivity of the bottleneck, but it also at the same time makes sure that all the stuff that's supporting it increases in proportion so that you don't suddenly move the bottleneck away. Now, you see all those other roles there, automated testing, scrum mastering, tech lead, project manager, CEO, all those, they can all also be a supporting resource. And oftentimes, like there's a lot, have you ever seen the case where you got a scrum team and they're spread over 4 teams and they're really cutting corners and they're doing the best they can, and all of the teams are just running slowly, and they would actually run better and get more work done with just a little bit more love and attention from a scrum master. You can, if you have a scrum master who's not got enough time, have very, very, very busy teams, but they're not nearly as productive as they could be because there's a bottleneck that's kind of hidden up there. Okay, so that's why there's a bottleneck there. The champagne one is to remind you that most bottles, the bottle is actually the top of the organization, the above kind of the team. And finally, just one little word, don't call them a bottleneck, call them a flagship resource, because a lot of people react negatively if you tell them they're a bottleneck, even though it should be a point of pride. Hey, we're the bottleneck, you guys, you support us. But often you can get a negative reaction. Right, now, I have talked too much. I found myself utterly riveting, by the way. Do we have any questions? Well, Silky, do you want to host the question thing? I know Dan's
that
there.
was awesome, Clarke. Thank you so much. So many insights. We literally have 4 minutes left, but there were some questions and we do want to answer them. And people that have been to this meetup know that I am not too fuzzy about times, and we actually like to hang out. So if you do have to leave, that's fine. If you do want to grab a bottle of wine, a bottle of beer or a glass of wine, go ahead. And we will just hang in and answer all the questions, if it's okay with you, Clarke, and just have a good time here. Cool. So I have actually seen, if you go up in the chat, there have been some people asking questions, and I'm going back to there have been some. There has been C. I'm not sure. Just it was just C. The name asking. I'm sure Clarke will get to it, but in my experience, software teams get my flagship diffs thinking it will make them go faster, and don't spend near enough time thinking about the quality of product management, analysis, and design. Has that question been answered? Is C still among us?
Yes. Oh, can I just say that's a I think I have actually answered that at the end. That almost every single team has too many developers, and then they go, "Oh, we're not going fast enough. We'll add more developers," and it's an instinctive thing to think, if I want more code, I need more developers. Everyone else will just suck it up. I remember maybe I was in Wellington at the time, about 4 years ago. There was a conference here, and I did a talk on this stuff, and someone couldn't attend, and he got told, come talk to me. So we went and had a coffee, and I explained this concept. He goes, "Oh, that's so brilliant. That's just so brilliant. I know now, I can see this. So only one trouble. It's just 2 days ago, I just hired 2 more developers." And because they hired more developers because they thought they'd get more done, he actually needed to figure out, he probably needed actually to get another tester. In this case, that's usually the common thing. And actually, I never mention it on here specifically, but the hardest thing to do is to get that internal customer. I think actually, if I hang on, yeah, sorry, I had it in the next animation and I forgot about it. The internal customer, that one, you can't see my screen. The internal customer, the sponsor, the person who's got 2 jobs as the head of marketing, and I'm supposed to feed this team here, getting their time is really, really difficult. But then when you go, oh, look, more than anything, I can have a team that's really fast, but without them, I'm heading in the wrong direction. So if there was one place you look, every team, don't get more developers, get people, and I'm not saying developers don't have people skills, but get people with people skills who could sit down and have a good, almost a sales conversation and a problem-solving conversation with the upfront customer, and get them figuring out how the team can help their customer get more time. And it might be one of the simplest things I've done. It was with a civil servant who had a team of about 40 people. She was supposed to be prioritizing. They all complained they couldn't get time with her. So I just said to her, well, look, why don't you just every day from 9:30 to 10 o'clock, book a meeting room, get your PA to book a meeting room, and just go there and just make sure that the team knows they can come and ask you questions. And if no one turns up, do email. She goes, okay, did that. And the bottleneck shifted away from her, but she basically gave them double the time, just with a tiny, tiny intervention. It was like those 2 chairs. Now, I think I answered about 3 different questions then, Silky. You're on.
Sorry, I'm on mute. So that's really cool. So do you think it's 3 different questions that were actually in the chat, or?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I just
right. I'm not sure. Did you answer Daniel's question? What's your go-to example of a system without Flagship Resource?
So maybe you could. It just depends so much. But just imagine a coffee shop where you've got 2 or 3 baristas. And no offense to any baristas here, but they're feeling much interchangeable. You've maybe got some waiting staff that they're kind of like a commodity as well. Perhaps on that one there, it could be the coffee machine, could be the flagship resource, but probably not. Let me
give you another example, because I've been thinking about this. Like, you can think of large organizations with multiple value streams. So presumably they'll have separate bottlenecks for each value stream. But I was thinking about, for a sporting example, to take one more universal, something like a soccer team.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, and this will come to the more profound question, which is, why are the developers, are they the most expensive? Is that the locus of where value is created? So on a soccer team, which is a very integrated sport, it's not really like, it's integrated, but there's a fair bit of randomness as well. So, you know, you might say if it was a rowing squad, the constraint is the slowest rower, and you can't go out of time with that. But would you say a soccer team might, or a football team for the Europeans, has a single identifiable constraint, or somewhere where you'd want the constraint to be?
I've not thought about it, and I don't think I could give you a decent answer.
No worries.
And it's sport. I'm a computer scientist.
Go sports, yeah.
Maybe if I could interject you, Clarke. I think there are systems that don't have flagship constraints, especially in the TOC world. If you talk about simplified drum buffer row. So if you're talking about a system where your constraints in the market, in other words, you don't have enough demand coming through, you don't have a flagship resource. And in that instance, you are essentially doing what's called simplified drum buffer up, which is essentially, as stuff comes in, you're delivering it and your throughput goes up. So there's an instance where you would have a system without a flagship resource. Noting that as demand increases, the first resource to slow things down will be your flagship resource.
Awesome, but is that because of where you're drawing the boundary on your system, and because we're saying resource and the market is of a different character?
Yeah, so look, if you take your soccer example, right? So let's come back to the football example. In the TOC world, resources are one form of constraint, but so are policies. So what constrains a football team is the rules and regulations around not being able to handle the ball, not being able to be offside, not being able to do those. So it's the policies that set the constraint. Much like the same in the Kanban world, it's the policies in each queue that dictate and set its limits as well. So we are constraining each part of the process.
So would the start, like if you've got, I don't know, Pele on your team,
yeah,
are they could they be the constraint because you just give it to them and they kick a goal?
You see that the constraint.
Would you subordinate everything to a really good player? I mean, look, sorry if I'm derailing this too much.
Does it actually help us to get further on the topic of today's meetup? Because I think we might actually head off here a little bit into.
I will say, just on
let's come back to the topic of today, which is, why are the developers the flag? Why is it that you want the developers to be
the thing I haven't told you now is I've told you all the logic of why they should be there, but I've not found a way, if you have too many developers, in other words, you know, that shape, if you have too many developers, ideally we just slow them down, just say, hey guys, this is cool, Fred, we've got too many developers, just sit on your hands, or don't do anything, right? And then we'll just slow it down to where the bottleneck is, which is, you know, it's probably, say it could be testing. And they go, okay. And then they all start looking for new jobs, or they start creating work. And I've not found an elegant way that's actually reliable to slow the developers down, to get them so they don't just start working on stuff and keep themselves busy. It's kind of like that idle hands make the devil's work. If you, in the other roles, it's easier to manage that. And there's also this expectations that the developers are there, they've got to keep busy. So one of the things that could sometimes be a bit brutal with, I've seen it over and over, and it's that the instinctive reaction when you realize that we've got too many developers, we've got the frowny face. And then people go through and they fight it. They go, no, we haven't. Then they go, oh, we have. And then, so suddenly, if you're not careful, you lose a bunch of contractors and they reduce it down. And it can be quite brute force. There's a better way of doing that. So moving to the U shape, you want to get people problem solving together to say, hey, look, here's our problem. We've got too much development capacity. And if you guys actually want to, if you haven't already seen this or done this, you'll find that the example at the back of the book, which is even the whiteboards, if you read it before, she actually had testers as her constraint. And then after a while in the real world, once we'd done that, we managed that, and maybe 3 months later, she was able to release a couple of developers from her project back to work on other projects. So yeah, from her team to work on other projects, which actually set it to be the U shape. And it just become much easier. Otherwise, she had developers who were sitting there with not a lot to do. So, sorry, and I probably muddied that. But the short answer is when you realize you've got too many developers, they're going to keep themselves busy. They're going to create WIP without all the other roles involved. And you don't want that. And they're just going to make a mess. So what we do is we get them creatively figuring out how they can collaborate and help in the other roles.
I wanted to give an example, hopefully that will help. So first, I seen a while ago a kind of a Lego building in LinkedIn, where the top were actually 3 mini blocks holding it without the fourth. And they asked us what we're going to do if there's a constraint. And the idea was to actually, instead of adding that fourth cube to balance the top, they actually removed all the other 3 and created that balance. And I think if we're visualizing it, and an experience that I had in one of the team was that we had a few developers and we've seen that the team is very, very frustrated. And it seems like one of the developers tend to overcomplicate it and wanted to do, bulletproof code. And the minute we removed him as the constraint of that team, the team suddenly started to function and deliver. So sometimes the solution is not actually adding things, it's removing things, and that's what will give you. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, align with what you're trying to present.
Yeah, that's actually, it's quite surprising how often the solution is to not add stuff, but to actually take stuff away. Yeah. The general version here is get people collaborating and get them helping each other and get them problem solving for the whole system. And this here, when you frame it as, guys, we've got too many developers. How can we get them helping other people? Suddenly you can change that. Now, there's a little warning. As you get into this stuff, what you'll find is that the U-shaped team calms down, and it's wonderful. And it's really productive, and people love it. And then you get a new manager come in, and they go, look at all these lazy bastards. And they'll take away some of the supporting capacity that's around them, and they'll flip the team over. And I cannot tell you how many times that happened. When you go, so obvious, keep it like this, it's wonderful. But they'd look at it with the eyes of not being busy and being calm as being not productive. So that's the most counterintuitive bit. We all think busy is busy is busy. But it would be like, if you can imagine, like a really silly example, just imagine if firefighters got incentivized by how busy they were. So you'd have half the firefighter teams out lighting bushfires, and the other half putting them out, and they'd be busy all the time. It'd be wonderful. But we don't do that because we value their that proactive, reactive sprint capacity that they have, just like the Formula One pit crews. I hope I didn't blow anyone's mind with that.
Cool. Dan unfortunately had to drop off because his laptop and his phone died. So I'll keep up. Martin, Chespro, there was an answer from you. I think that had been answered. Has it?
Oh, Martin. Yeah, a lot of people think that. I'll just read it out. But forgive me, it's actually wrong. So Martin wrote, my perception, not sure that it's correct, is that TOC is best applied in linear and deterministic systems, whereas my experience with developing software products is that the process is very non-linear and definitely non-deterministic. Okay, your experience
that was later. I was thinking he had a comment before.
Yeah, I'm happy to do
fine.
that one as the most recent one.
There you go. I see you there, Martin.
Jump in and talk to me about.
So you did right. It looks like that. It looks like software is like that. But if you draw it out, it's you've just got loops. You've got loops going backwards and forwards, and there's a lot of the stuff that goes on. And hang on, I'm not sure if I can give you an answer that you will actually believe. Apart from that, every time that someone's given this, I've come in and look. I come in and I look at their team, and I go, geez, this looks really chaotic. And they go, building software products, and they use the same words. It's it's a non-linear process, and it's definitely non-deterministic. And what they're comparing it with is the view of a factory, which is where TOC came from, and where the goal was based in a factory. But you come in and you look at it and you go, just over and over and over again, you go, oh, look, this is interesting. You guys are like one example, the actual bottleneck was that they had too many developers and not enough tech leads. So they had a very chaotic looking system because the developers weren't getting the coaching and the mentoring and the management that they needed, and they were producing bucket loads of defects. They were all loops and it was chaotic. And then when they just slowed things down, they got in a tech lead who gave them time, and it just suddenly, it wasn't linear, but it was a whole lot calmer, and it was caused by the bottleneck. There's this weird thing. I know I'm probably sound like I'm obsessed with bottlenecks, and I call myself the bottleneck guy or the bottleneck detective. But if people aren't managing their bottlenecks and they're trying to fix stuff, they have a bottleneck and they're trying to fix stuff isn't the bottleneck. And so many of the problems come from not managing the bottleneck. So like a huge amount of quality problems come from trying to run a system faster than its bottleneck. And that's, if you wanted to sum up the N-shaped team, the bad one, the frowny face one, where you've got too many developers, they're trying to run their system at the speed of too many developers. And it causes a huge amount of quality problems because everyone's cutting corners because they haven't got enough support capacity around them. It would be like if the doctors said, oh, we haven't got enough nurses here to provide this stuff. Don't worry about cleaning the equipment. Just pass them through and we'll run as fast as we can. So yes, I understand what you look and what you see. It makes sense, but it is actually wrong. And if you're willing to trust me and just go, when it looks like that and there's chaos, I wonder if there's a bottleneck. I swear you'll find it, and you'll find that everything calms down. And it will still be non-deterministic and non-linear, but it will be so much more manageable, and you will find that there is a bottleneck. And when you manage it, everything just gets a lot better. Very good question, though.
Thank you.
And then there was just disagreeing.
Yeah. So Clarke, you made a comment around, well, if you follow the goal and the 5 focusing steps, your bottleneck will be in the wrong place. Well, not true, because you will at some stage get to your strategic unit. What you have chosen to do was put in place a strategic constraint in your development process. With putting in a strategic constraint, there are complications with that. So if you go to your U-shaped model, what you're saying is that operations needs to have more capacity than dev. Now, when you're trying to put in more capacity, relative capacity, as you're talking about, than dev, that's an expensive exercise, right? So when we're looking and choosing strategic constraint units, if you are only looking at the dev process, then I agree with you. And if you're only looking at the dev process and you're scaling it across multiple teams, then you are not doing TOC. You are doing lean.
I agree that's a different opinion to mine.
Look, I live and breathe this TOC stuff on a day-to-day basis. You know, it's where I come in. I do TOC in IT. It's my job. So I think if you are looking at a local team, so like if you're forming Scrum teams, then you are not doing TOC, because TOC has one constraint, and what is constraining the throughput. So you've got to look at the entire end-to-end process, and the entire end-to-end process in TLC. And you know the goal, you would have read it a lot of times, NCX10, and you understand why NCX10 was there, and then you'll also understand why the assembly buffer was put in place for due date delivery. So if you are looking at parts of the system, and as you'll know from Gold Rat standing on the shoulder of giants as well, local optimization does not equal to global optima. So you have to find a way in which you can tell operations not to release work, so you've got to choke the release. And if you were going to define something in a strategic constraint unit, I would actually take it as being the product owners, because then therefore I've got capacity in the rest of the system with no inventory delays and my lead times decrease. Whereas at the moment, what you're suggesting is if I've got a U-shaped team, then if I keep my product owners busy, I create inventory of work that needs to be worked on, then my devs work on it. It then will be happily passed through to testing, etc., which will have absolutely no delays on, but you will have increased work in progress and delays because your product owners are developing things and starting work that you can't actually release. So you have to go into TLC's third step, which is subordination, and only make sure what you release into the system is that of which the constraint can handle. Plus the buffer.
I agree with that. That's what you do with what I'm saying anyway. You would create a U-shaped team, and you would not just keep the product owners. Now that you've created all that capacity, you just wouldn't get them filling a backlog full of stuff.
But what I am saying is with that strategic constraint unit, there are considerations. So if we take a strategic constraint unit of development and we've got to have supporting capacity across everything else, typically the one constraint that you get in IT organizations is operations, because they always look at what's the cost to operate, what's our efficiencies, what's etc. And if we're looking at the system as a whole, we have to beat to the drum of operations and their ability to accept and support software. We can't make it dev because you're going to have multiple dev teams and you're going to have an assembly problem in release.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's a bit more complicated than we could untangle here.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to have
I also think it's very situational, and depending on the organizations, you can't really generalize that.
Look, I think we can. I mean, Clarke, I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline, and we'll draw this out. Yeah. And then we'll put some TLC thinking processes around it, and then we'll show how all of this stuff slows down, actually.
I don't think that would help. I think what's most useful for most teams is if you've got too many developers, figure out how to get them helping and collaborating other roles, so that they get good inputs and get fast feedback, and that they don't produce stuff faster than their users can absorb them. And then make sure that your front-end people, your customers, make sure they have plenty of time to think about and get them working in the right stuff in the right order. And I think
so with the statement of we don't know
Liad actually wanted to say something as well, I think, to that topic. Liad?
No, actually not.
Okay, it sounded like you wanted to say something. I'm not actually sure if we get any more value added out of this conversation here, to be honest. I think I'd like to move on to the next, because Hassan had raised his hand and he's also put a question into the chat. Hassan, do you want to? Was your raised hand the same topic than what you have in the chat? Would you like to just wrap it up yourself?
Yeah, it was more or less the same thing. Basically, in the U model, the opposite thing, we mentioned that the customer should be, his relative capacity should be lowered, so that the team is not overwhelmed with the task. But we do have some protocols like WAP and other stuff, so that we can rip the content and the tasks to the team as per their capacity and velocity. So my concern is about a bigger picture. So when we are going for a development process, we focus on the long-term requirements. We should get some sort of a product backlog stacked up, and it should be detailed enough so that we can focus on the long-term planning. So so with less requirements, less capacity from the customers, wouldn't we be compromising the factor of long-term planning?
I think you may have misunderstood what I was saying. Maybe there's a bit that I just saw. I've just read your note there. We want the customers, the people at the front, the internal customers, the CEO, the head of marketing, the head of product, whatever we call that role. We want them to have tons of capacity, loads and loads of capacity, so that they actually have time up front to do all that long-term stuff, and to feed the team at the same time. Because if we don't, they'll be constantly, if they only just have just enough to feed the team, they won't be able to do that.
The reason that I misunderstood was that they were at the bottom of the graph, which is totally lowered the capacity.
That was in the red one. Let me just check. Sorry. That was in the bad version. In the good version, which is the U shape, they're on the outside and their capacity is up here. Yeah, I'll try and tidy that bit up on the chart. Thank you. Yeah.
No, it's all clear. Thank you.
I think these were all the questions. If anybody has more questions, that's your spot now.
Break there with the hands up.
I had a quick one.
Yeah. Who was that?
Yeah, this is Daniel.
Hello, Daniel.
Hey.
Hey. So Clarke, this some of this concept seems familiar to ideas in the Mythical Man Month. So there's a chapter that talked about the surgical team and ideas about how to support essentially the lead developer with a variety of different roles.
Since I read that.
So anyway, I think there's an interesting through line there. It's not exactly the same, but I just twigged a memory. So
I actually had an email conversation with Fred Brooks once. We basically told him off because he doesn't do software development anymore. But he was a very, very clever man. And he didn't have to have a conversation from me way back then. I might actually go and see if I can find my copy. It's been a really, really long time. But none of the stuff that's in here is all I'm saying is that if you want a really fast, productive development team, make sure that your customers got plenty of time to do their job, which is to kind of feed the right stuff in. Make sure that your BAs and product people, UX, whatever you do, make sure they got plenty of time to do their job properly so that they can feed good stuff into the next level. Make sure that the developers therefore aren't running out of work. They've got stuff prepared for them because everyone's had plenty of time to get there. Make sure they're not filling it up too much. And then the developers work on really good quality inputs. They don't have to be all thought out waterfall style to the nth degree. They just have to be there fast enough and well thought out. And then get them really fast feedback from either automated or manual testers, so that they just get that fast feedback and they can start stuff and they can tick it off or they can fix it and then they can move on to the next one. And then when the stuff's ready, get it to operations, who's going to release it. Ideally, that will be quick and smooth. If you have to batch stuff up and that makes commercial sense, that's good. Good sense. Then this is one of the last bits I don't have on the chart, but it's really surprisingly important. Make sure that you're not releasing stuff so quickly that your users can't absorb it. It's really surprising how often the end user gets bamboozled because we run our development system so much faster that we don't actually, they get overwhelmed. I worked at a government department. I was gobsmacked when I got to work at a government department here. Paul knows who I mean. And I got there and they were releasing stuff. They got so fast, but the many civil servants who were using the software weren't following the proper processes and procedures because they just couldn't keep up with the flow of change that was coming out. And so they were effectively doing things badly. So in that case, what you would probably do is you look at it, you all get around and you go, oh, look, our system's now running too fast. How do we make it easier for the users? Maybe we batch up stuff. Maybe we spend more time communicating it simply. Maybe we slow down a little bit, all sorts of things. But again, you don't want to have the users to be your ultimate bottleneck.
I think that's connect everything to value. So it's not just what you're streaming, where are the bottlenecks, it's actually what value do you give? And if you try to give too much value, as you mentioned, you're actually losing value.
Yes. It's really weird. You just wouldn't think that could happen. But the number of people that hate Agile, who are the end users of Agile, because it's just, just stop changing stuff all the time. Not always. I love Agile. I love Kanban. I think Agile and Kanban are the same thing. All of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, sometimes we do stuff that's really good for us. But in the bigger picture, it's that question I had on the choice too. Is it actually good enough? And if we've got teams that are really, really productive and we're pushing stuff out the door and it's overwhelming our customers, that's not good enough. That's a problem. That's a beautiful thing to have, though, when you recognize that it's not good enough, because then we go into problem solving mode and we're all really good at solving problems and collaborating. Now I'm getting all passionate.
Correct. There is another raised hand by Greg for a good reason, because I actually hang on. Is our speaker still here? Yes, you're here, but Craig's gone.
It's like this is a symbol.
No, Craig, yeah. So something has changed in my view. Sorry. So you actually had a question in the chat, and I actually missed that one. Sorry, Craig. So here you go.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought I was being
Last
ostracized.
one for today.
Yeah. Kanban coach. No, not allowed. It was just interesting because my question was as to whether you had seen situations where the bottleneck was dynamic and moving around. And I had seen that on teams, depending on seasonality, on vacations, on stakeholders, on the type of work. So, whether you call that, Kanban, who says, well, you just look and you always see where your bottlenecks are and visualize it, or you just constantly reapplying theory of constraints over and over again. That's it's 6 to 1, half a dozen the other.
If someone's got COVID and suddenly they're lost for a week, it's going to mess things up. People get it's going to move around. But what you can do is, I'm just wondering if this analogy works. I'm just trying to pull it back out of my head. No, I can't confidently say what I'm thinking to say without messing it up. So I won't say it.
Well,
yes, the bottleneck wanders around, and it can do. But what you want to do is set up your team so most of the time that it doesn't. So this is the analogy. Most of the time, imagine a well-functioning, if you can imagine this, a well-functioning traffic system. It's a city and everything actually flows surprisingly well. You go, actually, this is set up well, and you know where the bottlenecks are. They're the bit where it comes over the bridge if you're in Sydney, and here it's next to the KFC down there, and most places know where the bottleneck was. And if they manage that well, they'll get more traffic through, and they'll have helicopters over coordinating and all sorts of exciting stuff. But then there's an accident, and suddenly everything goes haywire. So ideally, that traffic system will have enough capacity built in and enough thinking so that when there's a moderate accident, it doesn't send everything.
And what you don't want to do is widen the road in response to a, once in a generation issue or rare issue. That's just not the right, because then it'll just, I guess I've been working in the U.S. government and one quick, we always thought we were looking at a team, a team of teams, and it seemed like, we're always getting poor quality. We don't have enough testers. Come to find out that actually the analysis was not being done properly. There wasn't enough. You could say there's not enough analysts, or you could say there's enough skilled analysts, but whatever it was, the analysis wasn't being done. So the developers for their time trying to figure out what was actually needed rather than actually developing. So we said, okay, great. Now we understand the bottleneck. And then we realized, well, wait a minute. Why aren't you guys delivering to production? Well, actually, the current system is COBOL, and we don't have a system that can connect between Java and COBOL. So we're not going to deploy until 3 years from now when we're done with the entire system. So I said, well, you guys aren't agile at all. You don't have enough developers, because you should be spawning another team to build a connector to actually make it so you can deploy to production more often. So we said, oh, now we found the constraint. And then come to find out, no, actually not, because the front end because in the federal government, you have to come up with a budget ahead of time before there's any team, before anyone has been hired, before anything's been approved. And what was happening is they were doing this analysis, which is, analysis that could have been used. They were using function points and earned value and all these other things. And so the team, when it started, they had to throw it all away, and they weren't doing stuff. So they said, oh, now that's the bottleneck. So it wasn't really that the bottleneck so much was moving around, is that as our purview as our view got wider and wider and wider, we started seeing, oh, there's Australia. Oh, there's the Earth. Oh, there's the solar system. Oh, wait, hold on. There's the Milky Way. Then we realized that there was a bloody black hole over here, and we realized, oh, nothing else matters. You got to fix that black hole first.
Do you remember the project? You remember had the model, the ATM model, the Thrive model, has those three things, circles around it. One's projects. It sounds like that one hadn't stacked to the deck, so it would be successful. It sounded like it probably stacked the deck so that people would be working. And depending on how it was, that could have been really successful because a lot of people got paid. Keep working.
You're such a cynic. I love it.
I remember the Scottish Parliament when I worked there. It started at 40 million and it ended up costing 400 million.
Yes.
And everyone goes, this is terrible. This is a disgrace. And there were a whole lot of construction companies and families that work for them, and consulting companies and design companies and everything. They were thrilled because they just made 400 million and kept a whole lot of people employed. So that is cynical, but yeah.
Thank you.
Life is hard. I'll just give you really quickly an example of when a wandering bottleneck is actually quite good if you know it's going to happen.
One last quick
from
one.
Where I live here. Yeah, okay, cool. From where I work here, there's a lot of forests down through the South Island, and there's a port just that way, 5 miles that way. And the trucks go to the forests, and there's forestry crews out there, and they chop down the trees, and then they put them on the trucks and they drive them back. And my brother-in-law is one of the truck drivers. He said, oh, it's annoying at the moment because they have to, they've shut down two of the crews, the forestry crews, the ones with chainsaws. And I go, oh, okay, that doesn't sound like good news. He goes, oh, it's not really. It's just that that where we're working is about twice as far away, so we effectively have half as many trucks. So we can't have, there'd be no point them chopping stuff down because they just chops too much stuff down and we couldn't get it to the port. So they just give them time off, and they plan around that. So that is effectively a wandering bottleneck that goes from the crews to the trucks, to the crews to the trucks. But they know that's the nature of their work, and they think about it. You wouldn't want it if it was you don't want your bottleneck wandering around inside a smaller system like that if it's chaotic, because it can end up like that comment before about non-linear systems. You need to pack your team so that it's got the bottleneck in the right place, and then sometimes when there's an accident, the traffic system doesn't cope so well, but most of the time it kind of does. Right, who's sick of the sound of my voice? Come on, Daniel, stick your hand up. Daniel stuck his hand up.
in anticipation.
No, it was awesome. Thank you. I don't think there are any more questions now, to be honest. So we've gone actually like into 2 hours. Thank you so much for answering all the questions, Clarke. It was awesome. Really good insights, new insights as well. The one thing I maybe wanted to mention, because Kanban has been mentioned a few times, even though it was really a Clarke talk here today, Kanban is just misunderstood still a lot, and that's why maybe just a few sentences around that. To me, it wasn't always like that. I was also once one of those that didn't know about Kanban and thought they would. For me, it's actually, when you talk about the agile umbrella, I wouldn't actually put Kanban in there anymore. It's not a framework even. It's not a process framework as such, as other agile frameworks would be. Kanban for me is more a way of thinking, a thinking method. It is a change management method. And it does embrace some things, some other methods that work really well with it, like DevOps works really well with it, or TOC works really well with it. We have OKRs next. They work really well with Kanban. So Kanban really adjusts to the context, and that's what we like. And that's, I think, what was also part of what today was meant to talk about. It's always about the context in an organization. It's not like putting a framework on top of something that thinks it works somehow, but it doesn't. It's not like a skeleton. And that's what this meetup is about. We like thinking models. We like models and methods that look at an organization as it is, and help the organization at all levels. And that's why I brought in the scaling beforehand, because we think a lot too much on teams level. There is a lot more you can do in the organization on a scaled level. But as the organization is right now, that's our first change management principle. And so thank you so much, Clarke, for this insight today. In the Kanban context, Kanban, you can probably even create SAFe out of Kanban, or you can create Scrum out of Kanban. There is nothing you cannot do with Kanban. And this is why I love it so much, but it doesn't mean Kanban is the world. There are so many good things. TOC is one of these things. Let's just embrace all the tools that are out there and use them to help organizations and our clients best. That is my message for tonight, just because Kanban has been mentioned a few times on side notes. And I think this is just a really, really important message to me. Are there any final words from you, Clarke, you would like to add?
I was going to say Kanban is just an inferior version of the theory of constraints, but I thought I wouldn't say that because you might punch me through the screen. No.
It's one slide in one of our many trainings. That's what I have as a response.
Kanban's one little bit in their slides of bigger things. So I think it's all good. It's all good. It's all wonderful. It all works together, and we've all just got to figure out how to work together.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm keen to learn more. Really, really awesome to work with you every time.
If you like, have a write-up beyond the picture
of the ATM model.
Yeah.
No, and the reason I don't have it is because I've got squillions of words in these things and stuff, and I'm working on that.
A concise summary, for those of us who take the information better in concision.
Mostly what I'm doing at the moment is practicing the articulation of it in front of people to see what makes sense and what doesn't. Because simply that. It's like most of my books have come out of talks that I've done previously, and practice the words out loud. You get the feedback, like we like to see what resonates, what doesn't sort of stick, all that kind of stuff, and then I turn it into a book. Except with this one, again, this will become a small book, and it's one of those things. You see how long we've talked on one of the 9 things on the outside. There's a lot in there, and I don't want to turn it into a huge book that goes into too much detail, because I can't write that kind of thing. So I'm trying to figure out how to write a small one that gets the essence of it without.
I reckon I could interrogate you and help you out with that.
Oh yeah, it could be an option.
Clarke, if you do you have time for like 5 minutes after this?
Yeah.
Cool. Right. So I think I wrap it up now. I actually stop the recording. Finally, this will be a long one.